The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Thank you everyone for joining. We should be starting in just a couple minutes. Thank you everyone for joining. We should be starting in just a couple minutes. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar on thermal drones for public safety. My name is Mark Flam, and I'm the Enterprise Sales and Support Manager at DSLR Pros. We have a great panel for today's discussion with drone experts from major police and fire departments, as well as thermal experts from FLIR. I'll give everyone a chance to introduce themselves. So first up is Craig Little. Craig, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Hi, I'm one of the lead pilots for one of the largest Southern California fire departments. Our UAS program is in its infancy stages, with our two frontline aircraft being Mavic 2 Enterprise Duals. Our main focus right now is pilot training and equipment familiarization, pretty much in anticipation of going fully live with the response matrix in the future.
Got it. Thank you, Craig. Also joining us is Dave Martell. Dave, can you introduce yourself? Hey, Dave, you there? Okay, we'll come back around to Dave. Also joining us today is Derek Ward.
Yeah, my name is Derek Ward. I'm also with one of the largest fire departments and busiest departments in California. I'm also a co-lead drone pilot and the director of public safety for Enterprise UAS. We train fire and police nationally, and I'm excited to be a part of this panel.
Thank you, Derek. And Dave, Dave Martell, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sorry about that. I'm Dave Martell from Las Vegas Metro Police here in Las Vegas. I am the UAS program coordinator for the department. We established our program back in 2017, and our first official mission was actually 1 October. We currently operate 2 Autel Evos, and we have a couple H520s. And about 10 certified pilots with us.
Thanks, Dave. Okay, also joining us is Stephen Slight.
Yeah, good morning, afternoon, everyone. I work hand in hand with Craig Little with the same large fire department. We're both just kind of doing everything we can to try and get our department and training up and running, as Craig mentioned. My background started in the hobby and tinkering, and it's kind of blown up, and just looking forward to helping these professions grow and use this technology.
Thanks, Stephen. Also joining us is Randall Warnes from FLIR.
Hey, Mark, and everyone in attendance. Randall Warnes, been in the industry for quite a while. I run FLIR's SUAS strategy for the industrial and civic side of the business, and just happy to be a part of this.
Got it. And last but not least, my good friend Brett Kanda.
Thanks, Mark. Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Brett Conda. I'm the UAS Business Development Manager at FLIR. I'm responsible for global sales of our UAS product. I've been in the drone industry as long as Randall. Had my own drone service provider for about 4 years. And then I spent 2.5 years working for the FAA UAS Integration Office. So excited to be here and join everybody. Thanks, Mark.
No problem. And again, my name is Mark Flam. I'm the Enterprise Sales and Support Manager at DSLR Pros. Today's webinar is hosted by DSLR Pros and is featuring FLIR. I'll start off with a real quick introduction about us. Established in 2012, DSLR Pros has been assisting police and fire departments and industrial and agricultural service providers to launch and scale their own thermal drone programs. We've been supporting FLIR Thermal Solutions since 2014 and are the #1 FLIR SUAS dealer in the country. We are also an authorized DJI, Pix4D, MicaSense, and SenseFlight dealer and are located here in Los Angeles. In addition to hardware and software, we also offer training and repair services. So a couple real quick notes about today's webinar. This webinar is being recorded and we'll share the recording with you afterwards. And Randall will be leading a Q&A at the end with our expert panels. Okay, so to start it off, Brett, can you share some thermal knowledge with us?
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. And so for questions, make sure you use the box on the right, the question box. Randall will be monitoring those through while we go here, and we'll bring them up during the Q&A portion. But before we get into the use cases for public safety, we think it's important that everybody has a basic understanding of what thermal imaging is, the science of thermography, and how it's being applied for drone technology. So what do we do at FLIR? We, through non-contact techniques, are able to sense the infrared band of the electromagnetic spectrum. So to the left of the infrared band, there's the visible light spectrum. That's what our eyes see, reds, greens, and blues. We are able to sense everything in the environment that is emitting heat. So that allows us to see in complete darkness. We can see through obscurance like smoke and fog. We can measure temperature by extracting temperature data out of every pixel within the image. We can do enhanced long-range imaging, and we can accurately detect people and animals using machine vision and AI algorithms. So one of the most important concepts to understand before we get too far into this is the difference between qualitative and quantitative analysis. Simply put, qualitative analysis, you are focused on something being hotter in one part of the frame than the other. You are not concerned with the radiometric data embedded in every pixel. And on the opposite of that, if you are doing quantitative analysis, you are taking that temperature data and applying it towards your use case. Generally speaking, utility inspections, solar inspections, and mapping missions are going to be doing quantitative analysis, while public safety operations are usually qualitative analysis. So we're going to go over some of the basics of thermography here. You'll be hearing these terms a lot throughout the presentation here. One of the biggest misconceptions of thermal imaging is that it's the same thing as night vision, which it absolutely is not. Night vision amplifies small amounts of light and requires some level of light, while thermal imaging is detecting emitted heat, and we do not need light to be able to do what we do, and we are unaffected by light sources. So each one of these topics I'm going to hit on a little bit deeper here in just a second, but emissivity, radiometry, MSX, frame rate, resolution, and lens are all the very important variables to understand when it comes to drone-based thermal imaging. So our drone cameras come in 4 different lens options: 9mm, 13mm, 19, and 25. They also come in 2 different resolution options, which is the pixel count of the image: 336 by 256 and 640 by 512. Generally speaking, for public safety operators, they opt for the 9 and the 13mm lens to have a wider field of view. I'm going to spend just a second on this because this is for quantitative analysis, and this is the concept of emissivity. Simply put, every single thing in our environment is made up of a different composition, shape, color, and therefore it interacts with infrared radiation in a different way. This is known as emissivity. These are known values, and there are ways to compute an emissivity of any texture, but these are some of the values here on the right. The general rule of thumb is that the higher the emissivity value, the higher the reliability on temperature data, and the lower the emissivity value, the lower the reliability. So a polished aluminum, it's much more difficult to have an accurate radiometric data set as opposed to wet soil. Again, don't want to spend too much time on this because it's really for quantitative analysis. FLIR MSX, if any of you are flying the Enterprise Dual or the XT2, you will see a feature called MSX. It's a patented blending technology from FLIR. Because there is both an RGB electro-optical camera on board along with a thermal camera, we are able to blend the 2 images together. Image on the left here has MSX turned off, so all you see is the thermal signature of this vending machine. Image on the right has MSX turned on. You are now able to see the outlines of the words, and that is really a useful tool for public safety operators when they're looking for some more definition in their images, for example, searching for a missing person. Now, a lot of you are likely flying the Mavic Enterprise Dual or the Parrot Anafi. And at FLIR, we have 2 lines of business. We have an OEM business where we supply integrators and airframe manufacturers with thermal cores, and we also build full camera solutions. So when you see 160 by 120 down here on the bottom left, that is the resolution of the Lepton sensor, which is the sensor inside of the Mavic Enterprise Dual and the Anafi. Image on the right is taken with a high resolution XT2. The resolution on the Tau2, which is the sensor inside of that camera, is 640 by 512. So what we're looking at here is an 18-inch in diameter pizza pan that's been heated up in the oven, and it's sitting on concrete. So this image was taken at 25 feet. You can definitely see a difference in the definition. As we go to 50 feet, even more so. You're maintaining resolution on the right, and we're starting to barely be able to make out that pizza pan on the left. As we go to 100 feet, it's almost impossible to tell that that was a pizza pan on the ground while we're maintaining resolution on the right. So the general rule of thumb, if somebody is flying a lepton-based camera, is to fly below 90 to 100 feet AGL to be able to get pixels on target for something the size of a human being. Little easier to understand here in a graph. The x-axis is the flight altitude in AGL. The y-axis is the size of each pixel of your target on the ground. So if you're flying a high resolution camera, which is 640 by 512, those are going to be the red dots. As you increase flight altitude, the object on the ground can be smaller. If you're flying a lepton-based camera, the higher you fly, the bigger the thing on the ground has to be for you to see it. Now, because what we're sensing is not visible to our eyes, we had to create a background to put these infrared images on. So that's what a thermal palette is. You'll see a lot of different options that we've created at FLIR, 15 to 20 different types of thermal palettes. The rule of thumb is that the darker the color, the colder the pixel. The brighter the color, the hotter the pixel. So if you take a look at iron bow here, if you look at an image with an iron bow palette, you're going to be seeing a wide range of color options. Generally speaking, for public safety operators, our suggestion is that you use the white hot and the black hot palette, so whatever you're looking for stands out easier. So now that everybody has a basic understanding of thermal imaging and how it works, let's get a little bit more into the airframe integration, technology, and I'm going to hand it back over to Mark.
Thanks, Brett. Yeah, and on that note, I want to take a second and discuss the importance of training on thermal drones. Cameras like the FLIR XT2 that you mentioned have a lot of useful public safety features like temp alert, isotherm, heat track, and MSX. But if operators aren't comfortable navigating the flight displays, they're less likely to actually use these features. So before we go into the commonly used aircraft, Derek, Brett, do you have any tips for training on thermal drones that you can share?
Yeah, I'll interject a little bit on that. So these are really powerful tools, and it's really important to understand their capabilities and their settings to get appropriate readings. So part of what we do in our training is we discuss the palettes and the isotherms, how they're used and why they're used. But also, like Brett was discussing earlier, it's important to know what your altitude is and what it is you're looking for. So you need to know the capability to have a pre-designated altitude and speed of the aircraft to actually find victims, for instance, out in the field somewhere. So there's many other aspects to the training, but those are just some of the things that need to be understood in what we do when we go out and train public safety.
Got it. Thanks, Derek. Yeah, thermal is extremely proven tech, but it does. Sorry, go ahead, Brett.
Oh, just wanted to add to the training that, spending 5 to 10 minutes discussing thermography doesn't do it justice. It's a very complex science, and the more that you educate yourself about how thermal imaging works and how the environment impacts your data, it's going to be really useful for you in the field. Not to mention the limitations of the technology. We produce, cameras for a wide range of applications. So obviously we've built these drone-based payloads for airborne inspections and public safety operations. But having a good concept of thermography is going to help you in the field and making sure that you are using the technology correctly. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, well said. Yeah. Let's get into this. Now we'll take a look at some of the commonly used aircrafts out there. So first up is the Mavic 2 Enterprise Dual. This is a lightweight drone with a smaller 120 resolution thermal sensor. So if we go back to that altitude test, that was the smaller sensor featured. The good thing is it's quick to deploy and great for low altitude missions. And it's got some really useful attachments like the speaker and strobe light. And it is based around the popular consumer drone, the Mavic 2, so it's very user friendly. So next up is the Inspire 1 XT. So unlike its replacement, the Inspire 2, the Inspire 1 is fully compatible with a FLIR XT. So this gives you the ability to fly a 640 thermal camera just like you would see on a Matrice 200, but on a much more affordable aircraft. But the Inspire 1 does lack some of the features of the newer aircrafts. It doesn't have the same range or flight time. So next up, we're looking at the Matrice 200 series. This is an industrial grade aircraft with features like obstacle avoidance, IP43 waterproof rating, 24-minute flight time, and a 4-mile range. It's compatible with FLIR's latest thermal cameras like the XT and also with the DJI Z30 zoom camera. It is also important to note DJI recently announced the Matrice 300, which also has some impressive specs, and we'll get into that aircraft in a separate webinar. And also there's a lot of other options out there beyond DJI with companies like Autel and Parrot also offering thermal solutions relevant to the public safety market. And lastly, DSLR Pros has created public safety focused bundles around these most commonly used thermal drones. These packages are designed to be turnkey kits that have all the hardware, software, and training you need for a successful mission. And if you're not sure what is the right drone for your mission, give us a call and we can help point you in the right direction. Okay, so next we're going to hear from our panel about some of the common scenarios where public safety agencies are deploying thermal drones. So first up, we're going to discuss search and rescue. Derek, do you want to tell us a little bit about how fire departments can use thermal drones to aid in search and rescue missions?
Sure. So let's just look at this image that you have here on the screen of a victim out on a field somewhere. One of the things we can do is identify the location of a victim and notify incoming companies or the IC of that location, both the longitude and the latitude. The other capability that we have that we wouldn't have otherwise is the fact that we can see through smoke. So in many cases during a brush fire, if a crew member gets separated from his crew or he's lost, we really have no way of helping from the air or anywhere else other than trying to establish the last time we've seen him. But now with the aircraft and a thermal camera, we can see through the smoke and identify his location and actually guide him out of dangers or harm's way. So that's one of the ways. And then there's all kinds of other things we can do, but search and rescue, we have a plethora of different methods that we use as far as grids and different things we do, autonomous flights, and then we can do that also with the thermal camera, which is extremely helpful.
Thanks, Derek. Yeah, and it seems like every month we see a new article published about some missing person that was found using a thermal drone. So search and rescue with thermal drones is a really proven use case. All right, and next we're going to look at structure fires. And Derek, again, can you tell us a little bit about how fire departments can use this technology to fight structure fires?
Yeah, so again, many different scenarios, but just to be able to identify unsafe areas on a roof, like a panelized roof or any other type of roof, is helpful. You know, we have a standard method of doing things to understand the integrity of a roof. One of them is sounding as we get on top of that roof. We use a pike pole and sound as we walk. But in many cases, we will, you know, we'll get it right 90% of the time, but there are times when we miss something, and that's when a life can be threatened or lost, right? I'll share a story with you of a friend of mine and a coworker that I work with at the fire station that 3 years ago, and I think I've shared this story before with Brett. He was on a panelized roof, him and his company, they go up and they were sounding the roof out, and as they went down 20, 30, 40 feet in, they fell through. Both my buddy and the rookie firefighter that was with him. They were okay. They got a few burns, and the rookie was put off duty and never came back. But my buddy is still coming to work, and he's still doing well. But the fact is by having a drone up top and being able to get that visual and identify these areas on these roofs, like a panelized roof, and make notifications to the roof team that's up on top, it's extremely helpful and useful. So that's one scenario that we can use that continually would help us. The other is being able to identify a collapse or a possible collapse of a roof and notifying interior companies that are fighting the fire to evacuate. So, you know, there's lots of different use cases that we can use, but those are just a few for structure fires.
Got it. Thanks, Derek. Alrighty, and up next, we're going to take a look at brush fires. So here in California, brush fires are a huge public safety threat, with fires like the Kincaid, Carr, Getty, and Camp Fire destroying hundreds of thousands of acres within the past few years. So Derek, can you let us know a little bit about how fire departments can use thermal drones to combat brush fires?
Yeah, so we'll start with hotspots. Normally, we'll send a crew in and start attacking a fire, and on a wildland fire, our resources are stretched. So we'll get the fire out and we'll move them along down the fire path. And a lot of times we'll miss some hot spots, and they're hard to identify. And there's really no good way of doing it without using a thermal camera. And by putting a drone up in the air and identifying where these hotspots are, we can send crews back to extinguish them before they turn into bigger fires. And we're actually saving property, we're saving lives, and we're saving homes, people's homes, by being able to use this technology on these fires. The other thing is, I mentioned before, we're able to see through smoke, so we're helping crews out, identifying the location where they are in conjunction to the spread of the fire. So we know what the fire is doing. We're able to watch where it is and how close it is to structures. Seeing through the smoke, identifying hot spots, those are just a few of the things we can do at a brush fire using drones.
Got it. Thanks, Derek. Yeah, and I imagine the ability to understand the scope of the fire is extremely beneficial.
Huge, yeah.
So the last one we're going to discuss on the fire side is reconnaissance and post-fire overview. So Derek, you want to start us off here?
Sure. So again, there's lots of things that happen after the fire's out. One, to identify the integrity of the structures that are still standing. We've talked about this in some of the other podcasts that we've done, but we're able to identify where these structures are. And many times in a situation like Hurricane Katrina, where we have victims up on the roofs waiting to be rescued, we can take a drone and identify where their location is and where they're at, and get the rescue accomplished a lot quicker and safer, and provide an access for them to get out. So those are some of the most important things for reconnaissance.
Gotcha. Yeah, and this is a good time to use software like Pix4D React as well to make a 2D map and aid with that post-fire reconnaissance, like you were mentioning.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Derek. So now we're going to switch over to the police side. We're lucky to have Dave Martell with us today. He's in a unique position to provide overwatch for some truly massive events. So yeah, we're really happy he could join us today. So Dave, can you tell us a little bit about using thermal drones for event overwatch?
Good morning. Yes, here in Las Vegas, we use our drones for a lot of like crime scene documentation and all. But when it came to 1 October, we learned a lot from that incident. So we now deploy our drones during outdoor events. We have quite a few here, mainly because we have some pretty warm weather all year long. So we deploy them in a way that we watch the outer perimeter. We're able to watch traffic control, as you can see on that photo right there. We also have a lot of parking structures and all around our outer event locations. So like that's at Sahara and the Boulevard. So there's a nice large parking garage, actually 2 of them, really close to this event. So instead of patrolling or putting officers out there going floor to floor, we can actually clear a floor rather quickly with our drones. But we also provide a live feed straight to our command post. So we also fly at NASCAR, so we do a lot of pedestrian control there. And instead of putting officers out in the parking lots patrolling for auto burglary suspects and all, because we have a lot of issues with that out there, we can actually map or have our drone fly autonomously out there in the parking lots to combat that. And we're providing a live feed straight to our command post and the officers out there in the scene. EDC is a big event that we have out at the Speedway, which is a 3-day event it's all night. So we use the thermal imaging cameras to control the outer perimeter, our fence line. We have a lot of gate jumpers, and we have another event, Concert Downtown, that we have a lot of gate jumpers for that too, and that assists us tremendously combating that. We've also started to deploy. We have a big issue with auto burglaries up north. We assisted a northern agency here locally. They were deploying officers out in the area, and luckily we had the aircraft out there with thermal. We had a suspect take off from them, and we were able to provide aerial assistance with them, or for them, with thermal, and track the suspect from backyard to backyard, jumping walls and fences and all that kind of stuff, and assist them to take the suspect into custody.
Got it, Dave. Thank you. Yeah, are you able to just share some general information on the different types of events that you provide overwatch for? I know you mentioned NASCAR. What are some of the types of events that they'll use you guys for?
We usually have big outdoor concert series. So it's like Life is Beautiful. We had A Day in Vegas is what it was called there at Sahara Boulevard. So instead of doing the outdoor concerts over there on the south end of the strip, now they're moved to the north end of the strip at a big festival ground. So it's like a 3-day event, and we're flying these aircraft for 3 days for 10 hours a day out there to basically provide a bigger and a safer area for our public to come and enjoy themselves watching concerts. We also deploy them for New Year's Eve. So New Year's Eve up on the strip, it's a good possibility you'll see at least 2 to 3 of our aircraft flying up and down the strip in conjunction with our air unit. So we'll have 2 of our own personal department helicopters flying the strip along with our drones.
Gotcha. Yeah, and you mentioned something else really interesting about the parking garages and how you're able to use the drone almost as a force multiplier. Instead of tying up officers to walk each floor of the parking structure, the drone is able to quickly inspect it. Are you guys finding this to be very beneficial? Is this something you're doing frequently?
Yeah, it's actually been very beneficial for us. We've had a couple individuals kind of camping up on the parking garages. Some were just trying to see the venue and listen to the music and all, but some were actually not some good people, and we were able to direct our officers directly where they were, because as soon as they saw the aircraft, they decided to try to evade it, and we were able to fly into the parking structure because most of them, they're all open on the outside. So with the aircraft that we were using, the Autel Evo, we were able to fly into the parking structure and follow them to the elevator and then watch floor to floor to see where they exited, and we're able to get officers to them.
Got it. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And you also mentioned that you would work with the like the North Vegas Police Department. Is it common for you guys to get called out on mutual aid or to help other departments or other agencies in your area?
It is. We're trying to assist them in establishing their program along with a couple of the fire agencies here. We've taught another agency on the other side of the mountain, so like Nye County and all. We assist them with establishing their programs and all, and until they are established, they call us frequently to go assist them.
Got it. Great. Well, thank you very much, Dave. I appreciate all that information. So up next, I think Brett has a video for us.
Yeah, and before we start the video, this may be the FAA talking in me, but a problem that we have in the drone industry is whether it be during a big public gathering or event, or it be a big brush fire in Southern California, hobbyist drone flyers, for some reason, think it's a good idea to go up and fly and get a better view of the fire or a better view of the event. And this has in the past caused official public safety operations to be shut down. So we are, as an industry, trying to voice and communicate the fact that hobbyists should not be flying while there's official public safety operations happening. So that's something that needs to definitely change in the industry, and something that can ultimately impact whether somebody lives or not. So please do not fly during brush fires, big events, anywhere where you might suspect that public safety operators are doing their job. So while we're on the topic of police, one of my favorite stories and what makes me really proud to work at FLIR is back during the Boston bombing. It was actually FLIR technology that was used to hunt down the suspects. And this video is going to give us a little bit more insight into why we were able to track them down. So I believe the videos or the audio here is not going to come through. So I'm going to mute it and talk over it a little bit here. But you're going to see some visuals that either at night or just using an RGB camera, you would not be able to see. And so in the case of the Boston bomber, the guy took off into early evening. The sun started to go down. He was running around some adjacent neighborhoods. Ultimately, the suspect thought he was going to be safe jumping in a boat that was in somebody's backyard, and it was covered by a tarp. Now, obviously, he had not listened to any FLIR webinars and did not understand thermography, but because his body was touching that tarp, he was ultimately transferring heat to the tarp, and because FLIR is able to see any type of heat differential in the surfaces of objects, we were able to see the movement and the heat signature, there it is right there, of that individual under the tarp. So with a normal RGB or visual camera, that's something you would have never been able to see. And it was actually our technology that ended up capturing the suspect in the Boston bombing. Now that's just one use case and one instance where the technology was useful, but I think it's interesting because of the TARP concept and the science and the physics behind what we do allowed us to capture him, as you can see right here in this video. So very, very unique situation. Obviously, we create a lot of different products, and you can see on the bottom of that helicopter, that is a thermal pod that's meant for a helicopter, but something that makes me definitely proud to work at FLIR, and you know, something that we really don't take for granted. And now I'm going to get out of this. All right, so now we're going to head into the Q&A portion of the webinar here. I'm going to hand the controls over to my colleague Randall Warnes, who's going to take us through the questions that you guys have been submitting. Continue to submit your questions. If we don't get around to them, we'll be sure to reach out to you and answer them for you. So Randall, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Brett. And like Brett said, just shoot over your questions. We want to get to as many as we can while we have a group of experts in both fire and police as well as thermography. So some have come through. One that I'll start with is, Dave, you were mentioning how working in some of these festivals, especially on New Year's Eve, you're flying multiple aircraft down the strip as well as manned aircraft are participating in that. How do your departments in general handle coordination with other manned aircraft and unmanned aircraft like the media and other people that could be using the national airspace?
So here in Las Vegas, especially for like New Year's Eve, we coordinate probably about 6-7 months ahead of time with all the other agencies that are going to be operating manned aircraft and unmanned aircraft. So we'll have meetings pretty much once a month until we get closer to New Year's Eve, and then we'll put it to about once a week. That way we coordinate exactly where everybody's going to be. Like for us, for instance, we'll fly at 200 feet maximum, and then we'll coordinate airspace above that, and we'll know exactly what aircraft is going to be at what altitude and at what time. So that's how we do it. And then when it comes to, of course, it is Vegas, so we have to do our fireworks show for New Year's Eve. All our aircraft will be grounded at a certain time for those fireworks. So when it comes to news agencies and all, we just do that via phone and via meetings. We actually have what's called a helicopters working group meeting here for all the tour helicopter companies, along with the news agencies. All the airport officials are at these meetings along with us. So that's how we kind of coordinate how and times and all that kind of stuff with those agencies.
Perfect. And do any of the fire folks want to take a response to that?
Well, we do things just the same way. Obviously, you got to coordinate your communication with your air ops when you're at a brush fire or any type of incident where you have airspace that you're using. You got to get the approval and the notification to airmen that you are in that airspace. And like Dave was saying, you got the longitude and the latitude and the altitude and the time that you're actually going to be there. And so communication is basically, if an air unit needs to come into that airspace, they already know you're there. They're going to communicate with you, notifying you they need to come in, whether it's for an airdrop or anything else, we're going to ground our aircraft and then make the notification to them that we are grounded and they're clear to come in. They'll come in, do their water drop, and as they leave, notify us that we can have that airspace back, and we're back in the air notifying our incident commander where we're at and what we're doing. So that communication should be like clockwork, and it should be very, very organized. And a lot of times you'll have other units, though, news agencies or somebody else that's not paying attention to the notice to airmen, and they can interfere in your space. So it's real important to have a good understanding what's going on, whether you got clearance or not. Keep your visual observer aware of overhead obstructions and other aircraft.
Perfect. So I'm going to read this question as it was submitted, but I think I have an idea of what they're asking. So the question is, do you have a projected ratio of crew training to flight time? And what I would guess this means is how much training time on the sticks or otherwise do you basically put in before you're actually out in the field flying?
So who's a question for?
Whoever understands what your agency is doing as far as training requirements.
Well, for us, it's going to be easily 90% training. So, we're always flying, we're always training and working with our aircraft, doing different types of scenarios. And then we're getting called out on a run, every so often. But the point is it's continuous training, and it should be. And you're continuing to learn different aspects of the job and of the technology. And technology is always being renewed, and there's new things being introduced. So it's important for us to stay abreast of those, to keep understanding of the regulations that are ever changing with the FAA. And so I would say at least 90% training to 10% actual emergency.
Yeah, this is Dave. We do the same thing. We require our new pilots, they have to go through 40 hours of training prior to flying any missions. And then we require a certain amount of hours recurrent training a month from all our pilots. But of course, that's not what we want more. So we actually fly quite a bit. We try to get at least an hour to 2 hours a day during the week of training in, and we've just now started implementing training with our local fire departments, other agencies, and all that as well. So we can get a nice joint operation going, and everybody can be on the same page.
I can jump in too. This is Stephen Slight. So as far as the training is concerned too, I think it's important to note that especially in the public safety sector, it's very different between proving competency in flying skills and having the second nature aspect to know that I can be confident in adverse situations. Because primarily when we are flying in emergency scenes, it's going to be non-ideal. So our department's training is broken down into multiple stages where first you have to prove competency in understanding the rules and the regulations. Next, you need to prove competency in being able to fly and control and understand all of the capabilities of each aircraft. And once you've proven competency in those two, it allows you to now start to participate as being a visual observer to see how are we using these on emergency situations. And that starts to build the ability for pilots to understand what are all of the things that I need to be looking for and all of the contingency plans I need to have, such as Derek Ward was talking about. You need to be prepared to land at any time. Just tackling comms alone is a training aspect. Especially where we are down in Southern California, the amount of air traffic that we have is insane. So you're handling AM airband radios, you're handling VHF and UHF radios to talk to the emergency sector aircraft, and then also dealing with radios for your own incident commander. So you can start to see where it gets complex. So I don't want to say that our program has any set hour skills, but we need to be confident that if we are sending a pilot out to fly on something as dynamic as a brush fire, that we know the actual flying of the craft is not even a focus. They should be able to do that without any hesitation, without any hiccups, because the mission is going to have far more difficulty than just flying the craft. So the flying hours should be dictated on how comfortable are you. The more comfortable you are, the more dynamic of an incident you can apply that pilot to. And that's kind of our viewpoint.
Perfect. So this next question, maybe we'll start with Craig, because I think in your intro you mentioned that you're using Mavic 2 Enterprise duals, but this there's two questions that came from international fire departments that are looking to use drone technology. One asked about the Anafi thermal and the other asked about Mavic 2 Enterprise dual. So we'll consider them the same as far as the thermal imaging capabilities. They said, do these airframes see well through smoke, even at night? And what is the ideal altitude to fly for a fire situation?
Well, from my knowledge, as far as if you're dealing with the Mavic 2 Enterprise dual, it's usually at a lower altitude as opposed to something that is actually outfitted with an XT2. So it definitely have to be at a lower altitude to get your best picture. As far as seeing through smoke, I haven't seen any issues with that. And again, we haven't gone on enough missions with that to comment on that. Maybe Steve has a better handle on that. But that's where we are, and that's only from the viewpoint of using the Mavic 2 Enterprise dual. Steve, do you have anything to input on that?
No, I think definitely it just comes down to knowing the limitations, and I'm sure Derek will be able to add more as well. But knowing that if your program's going to be limited to these smaller, more portable aircraft like the Anafi and the Mavic 2 dual, you need to understand that you're going to be flying in closer proximities to be able to still have the necessary resolution. And you'll be able to see through smoke, but also understanding if you're limited with flying at those low altitudes and you're going to be in a situation where you may be needing to fly through smoke, you need to now have, hardware sympathy in understanding that these aircraft are fairly well sealed, but you're going to need to do more thorough cleaning and inspections if your motors have been sucking up smoke and your processor and everything else. It's going to put wear and tear on these aircraft. So you have to weigh those odds of it's a less expensive aircraft, but I'm going to have to be closer to the danger, knowing that I'm going to shorten my overall safety margin of how long I can fly this aircraft without needing major maintenance, because you are putting it in less than ideal situations.
Great answer.
Derek, you have anything to add?
Greg and Steve both hit some really good points, and it's basically we're kind of talking about what we've talked about earlier, and that is to understand your equipment. The answer to the question, can you see through at night and through smoke, is yes. Understanding the capability of the camera is very important because different altitudes based on what camera and megapixel and millimeter lens you're using. So best thing in training, it's very important to understand what tool am I going to use. It's 2 o'clock in the morning, it's nighttime, I need to be able to see what's on the ground. So you need to understand, if you do have a Mavic Enterprise dual, you need to know immediately what altitude you have to be at and understand what's going on the ground. So that just becoming familiar with the tools, what their capabilities are, and when to use them at what incident.
Perfect. So this is actually a question that I've had for myself, but we had it come from the audience. Can someone speak to the effectiveness of using this technology in locating suspected drowning victims? So this would be any sort of water-borne searching with a thermal drone.
So the thermal camera is not going to see underwater, but anything above the water surface, it's going to identify. In many cases, if you have a body floating down the river, whether it's alive or dead, that thermic temperature is going to be pushed out, and you're going to be able to see it. So thermal cameras are awesome for that, for search and rescue and a swift water rescue. You're not going to have that big of a signature because it's smaller. It's a very small area. It could be only a foot long or wide. So you need to know that. And again, you're going to be at a much lower altitude, flying at a much lower speed to identify that signature.
So
that's a good point that you made, Derek. I'm sorry, I'm just jumping in here, Craig.
No, go ahead.
We just had a drill with our LA County Baywatch lifeguards over at Venice Beach. And we're going to have more drills on that, but they're using the Mavic Dual Enterprise in broad daylight. There's some issues that you're talking about there. We're talking about sun reflection off of the water. We're talking about maybe if we're in full view with a rescue lifeguard jumping in the water, now all of a sudden we can't see maybe only his head or the portion of his face that's outside of the water. We lost the rescue swimmer a few times in the camera, and we had to switch back to regular view. Now this is broad daylight circumstances. So switching back to regular view, we were able to find the swimmer faster than we were using the FLIR in broad daylight, heavy sunlight, as far as that goes. So that's something to keep in mind when you're flying at least the Mavic Dual Enterprise.
Perfect. So someone asked here, what is the difference between thermal technology and AI on drones, which I think is quite substantial, but maybe Mark, do you want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, what was it, thermal versus AI or thermal versus
thermal
IR?
versus, well, it says what's the difference between thermal and AI, but I guess maybe just getting a good concept of what is thermal and what kind of things are AI bringing to drone technology.
Well, thermal and AI is like apples and oranges, really. I mean, thermal is the ability to see radiated heat. AI is artificial intelligence. So we are seeing a lot of great AI features on drones, like waypoint modes and smart inspections and different new AI features being introduced. I do wonder if the question is thermal versus IR, which is a whole other can of worms. But we are seeing some agencies start to deploy IR strobes and IR flashers, and then combined with cameras that have IR, viewing capabilities. This provides people with a way to separate, friendlies from enemies based on being able to see the IR strobe lights that would be otherwise not visible to the naked eye. So maybe that adds some clarity there.
I can jump in on that a little bit too, Randall. This is Brett.
Go ahead, Brett.
So AI and thermal are one and the same in some scenarios. So there's a lot of AI being built into RGB drone payloads. And a good example of that would be, let's say you're flying an inspection mission, you're checking out a cell tower, and you have a built-in anomaly detection algorithm in your camera that would spot out and put a box around any type of abnormality within that cell tower. So as opposed to taking the image, going back to your computer, zooming in and out, seeing that fault in real time, you would be able to ultimately have that anomaly pointed out to you. So that's an example of AI in RGB cameras, and a very similar concept for thermal. For example, on the X-T2, there's a feature that will create a box within your frame, and there will be a blue cursor and a red cursor. The red cursor will go over the hottest item in the frame, and the blue cursor will go over the coldest object in the frame. So that's another example of machine vision. We have a business at FLIR that's called ADAS, which is basically a thermal sensor suite that goes on autonomous vehicles. And an example of machine vision and AI in that is we can accurately detect people, stop signs, animals, anything that you would see driving around. And again, instead of having to go and post-process that imagery and see those types of things, the AI and the machine vision is built in, and you're going to see it in real time. So that's kind of how they work together.
Perfect. Yeah, those are some good points there. And just to pile on, when we talk about using AI with thermal, features like the temp alert and isotherms are really valuable for the public safety market, for search and rescue, especially just having an alert that goes off if a certain temperature is detected makes it a lot easier on the operators. So there's definitely a lot of ways to combine AI and thermal.
Perfect. Thanks, Mark. So there's a kind of a two-pronged question. Someone asked the main issues with using drones for security, and then they also asked whether it's better to use drone technology for security or for rescue. So someone that's doing some people searching, can you maybe talk about what challenges you have in doing security missions, and then also whether you see more value in security or search and rescue type things?
Well, I'll touch on this and I'll throw it to Dave, because obviously we're not doing any security with drones. Fire service doesn't do security. And for us, it's a public issue, a public acceptance. You know, the public, the adoption of drones, one of the biggest hurdles is public acceptance and get them to gain trust. So for us, obviously, we don't want to be doing anything or looking anywhere we're not supposed to be. Now, law enforcement has a different objective and they have more responsibilities that they have to fulfill. And obviously, they're going to be using drones to help stop crime. So I'll let Dave touch on that.
Yeah, when it comes to like the security issues and all that, we value everybody's Fourth Amendment rights and all, because you know, I'm really big on that, and I push that with our pilots. We also have Nevada state law that really regulates what we can and cannot do with our aircraft and what we can and cannot do with the photos or video that we take. So we fly in all public access areas. So like these outdoor events and all that, we have the permission from the property owners and all to fly. The parking structures that are open to the public and all, that's how we are able to fly the parking structures. We will not go looking in the windows. We don't do anything like that. We're there to provide a better service for the public. The biggest thing for us is from the beginning, we got the public involved. We did a lot of PR work with local agencies, our news agencies. We've actually done a Discovery Channel show talking about how we utilize our aircraft and all that as well. The biggest word of advice I will give everybody when it comes to public safety is get everybody involved from the beginning. Get the public involved. Tell them exactly how you plan on using them. That has been tremendous help for us from the beginning. So we really don't get pushback when we're using our aircraft on outdoor events or for security purposes. New Year's Eve is a big thing here because we attract over 300,000 tourists here just for New Year's Eve on the Strip. That doesn't count our downtown area. So we did a news push, our sheriff did actually, saying that we're going to implement drones out on the Strip. And when we talked to people out on the street, they loved the idea. They felt safer out there. So that's how we did it, and that's how we continue to do it. We get everybody involved and answer any questions that they have.
Sounds good. With time consideration of time, we'll do one more question, and then just know that if your question didn't get answered, these will be sent between Mark, Brett, myself, and then the obviously the team to give feedback on. But we are getting close to the top of the hour. So the last question we'll ask here is, someone asked, what are some things they can do for training themselves in flight? And I think that obviously departments have standardized ways of doing this, but what are some just simple suggestions of things someone can go out and do to make themselves more equipped to be ready when the moment comes that they need to fly?
So I'll start off with this and just be completely familiar with whatever aircraft you're flying. Understand the flight systems, understand emergency systems, understand what happens when you lose control, when you lose your signal. Make sure you understand the return to home, the altitudes, understand your environment, your airspace, your regulations. When you do all those things first, because they're the most important, mitigating emergency and following the law, when you do that, then take your aircraft out to a park where you have, or a place where you have lots of room to fly, no overhead obstructions, and start understanding how the aircraft handles in different environments. Even go out on a windy day. If there's a 15-mile-an-hour wind, I love to fly in the wind only because I need to test to see what my limits are, what the aircraft's limits are. So if I get asked to fly an emergency, I can either say yes or no. Be familiar with flying the drone in ATTI mode. Very, very important. It's also a mitigating emergencies that way. Many times you'll get a signal or something that happens to the drone begins to have a mind of its own based on its the way it's communicating to GPS. So you need to understand how you can cut off that communication and how you can mitigate those emergencies. And then really understand just how that aircraft handles when you're out there. And then, you know, you're going to move yourself on to a different aircraft or whatever else you want to fly. But that's where I would say to start.
Does anyone else?
Also add in,
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, so I'd also add into that, definitely agree with everything Derek said. And then also, once you're comfortable with the aircraft and you're in those safe areas, put yourself smartly into bad situations. An example of that would be allow somebody else to fly the aircraft away and change the orientation. And then work on those drills of, okay, if I do lose track of which way am I facing or something else, can I still perform an emergency maneuver quickly? Can I bring the aircraft back to me, or can I quickly realize which orientation the aircraft's in? What tools do I have on my video screen and in my flight controller do I have to find out and go through all of those emergency situations so that you can feel more comfortable if the aircraft does act incorrectly, or if something does happen where, hey, I see that I have got to watch some air traffic that's coming in an aircraft. What's the best way for me to land? And find out, okay, what's the fastest way for me to get these aircraft down? There's a lot of tricks to doing more than just slowly trying to decelerate and bring the stick down that you can do to make quicker avoidance. So just working through those emergency situations so that you're more comfortable and it's not a fear, I think is one thing.
As departments, do you guys fly patterns like figure eights or orbits or anything like that when you practice, or is it more about like just being ready for a specific mission rather than being really good at the sticks?
It's both, Randall. You need to understand how to do a figure eight and do one tightly. You know, do a figure eight within 15 feet and then be able to stretch out that figure eight. You need to understand orientation of the aircraft. So if the aircraft's facing you, everything becomes opposite, right? Right is left and left is right. So you need to understand orientation. You need to understand how you actually control the aircraft in those conditions, and flying in lots of different patterns to understand how to fly when the aircraft's below you in a canyon. You know, all those different things are very important.
Yeah, good tips. Well, Mark, do you want to close us out?
Sure thing, Randall. Thanks a lot. So just a couple of really quick reminders. After the webinar, everyone will receive a link to the recording. So keep an eye out for that email and please share that recording with a colleague. Please visit dslrpros.com to find more information on the various aircraft and camera packages we discussed earlier. I hope you guys can all join us for our next webinar on Friday to learn about the new Matrice 300 and how different public safety agencies can deploy this aircraft. We'll be joined by public safety UAS experts like Derek Ward and Romeo. And you can find more information on that webinar on our social media pages or website. And then lastly, and most importantly, we at DSLR Pros and FLIR want to thank all the first responders out there keeping us safe every day. We appreciate what you do on a daily basis, and we're grateful for the opportunity to support this community. Thank you guys and have a great day.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks, everybody.
All right, thank you.